Okay, this screencast is going to pick up with the decision to drop the atomic bombs by President Harry Truman. So on August 6, 1945, a big B-52 bomber, which is a plane, named the Enola Gay. Enola Gay was the name of the plane. You don't need to know that. But it dropped an atomic bomb that was codenamed Little Boy over the city of Hiroshima, often referred to as Hiroshima. I've heard it both ways, but I think accurately it's actually Hiroshima. Anyway, so Hiroshima is the first targeted city. It was an important Japanese military center. Within, 40 seconds, a little bit more than that, almost every building in the city collapsed into dust. This causes heavy destruction, but Japan's leaders still did not surrender. On August 9th, 3 days later, a second bomb that was codenamed Fat Man was dropped on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. By the end of the year, it was estimated that 200,000 people died as a result of the injuries and radiation poisoning caused by these atomic blasts. At this point, Japan is forced to surrender, as the emperor says, "I can't bear to see my innocent people suffer any longer," because these are many civilian casualties in these death counts. Why did we do this? We did this to save American lives. Remember, we fear that a Japanese invasion will result in many casualties of the Allies, as well as Japanese citizens as well, but still. We want to force the unconditional surrender of Japan and end this war now and not continue the fighting. But we also demonstrated our superior weaponry in a competition way with other countries such as Soviet Union, for example. We'll talk about them in the Cold War. That kind of is a good little introduction to that. So on August 15th, the Japanese announced official surrender, and we equate this with VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day. And now the entire war is completely over because we have forced the surrender of both Japan and of Germany. Japan was the second one to be defeated, so this victory will end the war as a whole. Just to kind of talk about the concluding aspects of the war, the Nuremberg Trials are going to be held as trials for war crimes, and crimes against humanity and crimes against peace. It will involve many Nazi criminals being tried, as well as some Japanese leadership, including General Tojo. Judges are selected from the four major powers, U.S., France, England, and the Soviet Union, and they'll represent this kind of like military council that will decide on the judgments of several people who are being tried. Of the 22 Nazi criminals that are being tried, only 12 were sentenced to death. Obviously, Hitler himself would have been convicted, but he had already killed himself. Most of the defendants claim they were just following orders, but regardless, things had just gone kind of excessively during World War II, including the Holocaust, which I'll talk about briefly in a second here. But those who were directly involved had severe sentences, and again, including the sentencing to death of Japanese General Tojo. Okay. Some questioned, like, why the Allies were not questioned with their kind of crimes against humanity with, like, the dropping of the atomic bombs. But, again, they didn't lose the war, so they got to make some of these calls. We will talk about more of the conclusion of World War II in the next unit, as it's a good segue into the Cold War. A lot of, like, the meetings that deal with, like, the aftermath of World War II are directly like the beginnings of the Cold War. Because I have not yet had the opportunity to do so, I'd like to give a little information about the Holocaust at this time, as this is an important event in world history, something y'all might talk in more detail about next year if y'all have the time with your teachers. But it's still something I think that needs to be addressed, as it is a large part of World War II. So just to kind of give an overview, first off, 6 million Jews and approximately 5 to 6 million others. That's a total of about 11 to 12 million people. That's how many people were dead at the hands of the Nazi Third Reich within the event that is known as the Holocaust. This is the largest instance of genocide in history. Just to put the number in perspective for you, you don't need to know this. statistic by any means, but like the old Tiger Stadium, before it was like recently renovated in the past 5 years, held like 92,000 people. You would have to fill every seat in Tiger Stadium over 118 times to equal the number of people that were dead at the hands of the Holocaust. That's just incredible, just to kind of make you realize how many people were affected. Hitler and his Nazis did not just target Jews, they targeted people who were unlike themselves. So the homeless population, gypsies, Catholics, the mentally ill, the physically disabled, the list goes on. Basically anyone deemed inferior and not of the ideal group, okay, and population. We never really can know why he did this. There's lots of beliefs and theories behind his anti-Semitism, but what I want to just quickly look at are some of the events that occurred within the Holocaust as depicted on your screen. And this just kind of shows you the pattern. And by the way, we covered all this within the Schindler's List viewing. I'm not going to make y'all take detailed notes on all this, but just kind of be aware it was a process and not just like straight to death concentration camps. But first, the Nuremberg laws were applied in Germany and then eventually in the territories that Hitler annexed and claimed for himself. The Nuremberg laws put restrictions on the Jewish population in these countries where they couldn't go into certain places, they couldn't hold certain jobs, they couldn't walk on the sidewalk, they had to identify themselves wearing the Star of David on their sleeve. So that was just a means of restricting a specific group of people. The next step was the ghettoization of this population, where Jewish families would be forced out of their homes and forced into the kind of very crowded, concentrated neighborhoods where they could fit minimal things and belongings. And that process lasted for over a year in many countries, mainly Germany, but it did happen in places like Poland as well. Eventually, concentration camps were built and Jewish families would be shipped out of the ghettos and put to work. These labor camps were initially designed to make actions and efforts towards the war effort. So they would produce things that were used for war. They would build other camps that will be used down the line. So they're just basically forcing the labor, the free labor of the Jewish peoples. And obviously there were cases of murder, but they weren't being just executed in a mass way. Eventually, and I should say, you know, the Wannsee Conference technically happened first, where Hitler kind of vocalizes at this meeting that's happening within the Reich that the ultimate goal here is to murder every Jewish person, okay, that was being held in any of these camps or ghettos. Then we see a transition of the camps moving from labor camps to death camps. And that's when you see the blatant execution via gas chamber and then the crematoriums being used to burn the bodies at very, very high levels. And you all saw those patterns playing out in Schindler's List last fall. We know, Americans knew that, you know, Hitler was anti-Semitic, but we were completely unaware of the extent of the Holocaust and what was happening at these death camps. And it's, in fact, going to be the Soviets coming from the east through Poland. As they make it towards Germany, they will discover the first concentration camps. And then eventually the Allies will discover camps in the West. The troops are just horrified by what they find because they didn't know what was happening. So to see it for the first time after never having heard about it was probably completely just mind-blowing. There's a quote by an Allied troop or soldier saying, "This is not a concentration camp, it's a gigantic murder plant." They're just horrified by the atrocities that were taking place. And because of that, that is why the sentencing for some of the SS or Nazi officers was so harsh, because of how grave the crimes that were committed during this war actually were against civilian lives. All right, we're officially done the unit, thank goodness. Write down any questions you have. We will be spending all of tomorrow on review. Hope you all have a good day.